Imagine a car that was not born from the whim of a millionaire, was not a project from a factory research and development department, and did not have a major corporation behind it dreaming of a new production model. Instead, it was born inside a newspaper editorial office, from conversations between journalists who decided not just to describe the ideal Grand Tourer, but to actually build it. That is exactly how the 1967 Jaguar Pirana came to life, one of the most extraordinary and underrated concept cars of its era. This car was exceptional, not only because only one example was built, but also because it brought together three worlds that rarely meet in such harmony. Jaguar's British mechanical engineering, Bertone's Italian design, and a vision of a luxurious, modern GT created by automotive journalists. The Pirana was built for a driver who loved driving, but did not want to give up comfort, style, or technology. At a time when the Jaguar E-Type was already an icon, the team at the Daily Telegraph believed it could go even further. And it did. The result was a coupe that looked like it had arrived from the future, while at the same time relying on very real and proven components. Today, the Pirana is not only a rare classic, but also one of the most fascinating what-if stories in Jaguar history, and one of the most important stylistic bridges between the Lamborghini Marzal and the later Espada. The beginning of this story goes back to the first months of 1967, when editor John Anstey and his colleagues from the Daily Telegraph's motoring circle began discussing what the ideal GT car for a modern, wealthy driver should look like. This was not meant to be pure fantasy, or some futuristic sketch with no connection to reality. The idea was far more interesting: to create a dream car based entirely on components that already existed or were realistically available. It was meant to be a vehicle that was fast, comfortable, elegant, and modern, intended for a man who drove himself to evening social events, appreciated performance, but did not want to step out of the car tired and creased. In the age of swinging London, new fashion, new music, and a new lifestyle, such a vision had the perfect cultural backdrop. Anstey did not want to stop at a mere editorial exercise. He decided that their dream car would actually be built. In practice, that meant finding the right donor for the mechanical parts and the right coach builder for the body. The first choice was logical: the Jaguar E-Type, one of the most highly regarded sports cars in the world. The second choice was far bolder: Bertone, and more specifically the young and exceptionally talented Marcello Gandini, who was just beginning to define the look of the future. Cooperation with Jaguar was essential, because without the company's approval, the whole project would have remained only a beautiful idea. Sir William Lyons responded positively to the initiative and made available the mechanical basis in the form of a Jaguar E-Type 2+2. That is an important detail, because the wheelbase of the 2+2 version provided the right foundation for a more comfortable Grand Tourer, even if the Pirana would not ultimately become a true four-seat coupe. Under the bonnet was Jaguar's legendary XK inline six-cylinder engine, with a displacement of 4,235 cubic centimeters, featuring dual overhead camshafts. This engine produced about 265 horsepower at 5,400 revolutions per minute, and around 384 Newton-meters of torque at 4,000 revolutions per minute, which at the time gave the car performance fully worthy of a luxurious, fast GT. Power was sent to the rear wheels through a 4-speed manual gearbox, while the chassis, suspension, and braking system largely retained Jaguar's original solutions. At the front there was wishbone suspension with torsion bars, while the rear used an independent arrangement with half shafts and coil springs, and all four wheels were fitted with servo-assisted Dunlop disc brakes. This meant the Pirana was not an empty shell or merely a styling exercise. It was a fully functioning automobile with real driving ability, and it could be used exactly as intended. The body was created by Carrozzeria Bertone, or more precisely by Marcello Gandini himself, whose design language already revealed a fascination with a sharper, more geometric way of styling cars. Interestingly, the Pirana was developed at roughly the same time as other important Bertone projects, including the Lamborghini Marzal and the earliest stages of the later Espada. You can see this in every angle of the car. Even though an E-Type lay underneath, the Pirana hardly resembled it from the outside. Yes, the long bonnet and setback cabin were preserved, but the shape was completely new. Much more wedge-like, flatter, and more modern. The body took the form of a sleek fastback with a strongly defined sideline, a tall glass house, and a more sharply cut Com-style rear end. The front, with 4 round headlights integrated into a more horizontal face, looked far more modern than anything Jaguar was offering in production at the time. Gondini described similar projects as attempts to express controlled speed, and that is exactly what you feel in the Pirana. The car looked like a drawn bow, ready to fire. The body was built by hand, shaping steel panels over specially made wooden bucks, while the bonnet was aluminum. The entire process, from the first lump of clay to a finished, drivable car, took only 5 months, which is a remarkable achievement in itself. One of the most interesting aspects of the Pirana was that it was meant to be an ideal car, not only visually, but also in practical use. The Daily Telegraph team did not want to create an austere show vehicle. Their goal was a luxurious and usable GT that showcased the best achievements of British automotive and equipment suppliers. That is why many outside firms were invited into the project. Smiths Industries supplied an advanced air conditioning and ventilation system that directed cool air through the headliner and warm air through lower ducts. That was a highly modern solution and extremely rare in 1967. Smiths also provided interior equipment, including an AM/FM radio and an advanced tape recorder or dictation device. Triplex supplied special heat-absorbing glass, integrated with front and rear defrosting systems. Connolly provided the leather upholstery, and Bridax supplied color-matched seatbelts. The car also featured power-operated side windows, a power radio antenna, modern lights from Lucas, and a warning system that alerted the driver when a preset speed had been exceeded. As a result, the Pirana was more than just a beautiful body on familiar mechanicals. It was a moving demonstration of what a luxury car of the future could look like. The interior also perfectly reflected the philosophy of the project. Even though the base was an E-Type 2+2 chassis, the Pirana was initially a true 2-seat coupe rather than a classic 2+2. The goal was to provide more room for the driver and passenger and to increase long-distance comfort. The cabin was completely redesigned. It featured new bucket seats upholstered in perforated Connolly leather, new door panels, a modified center console, and a more integrated, orderly cockpit. Interestingly, some Jaguar instruments were retained, which meant the car still kept a certain British core, despite its clearly Italian style. But everything was subordinated to the idea of comfortable, high-speed travel. This was not a raw sports car. It was a project for a successful man who was supposed to cross continental motorways with the windows up, the air conditioning running, music playing, and full comfort all around. That is exactly why the Pirana was insured for £20,000, at a time when a new Ferrari 275 GTB4 cost around £6,500. That figure alone shows just how extraordinary and expensive the undertaking was. In a sense, a newspaper editorial team had created a car more luxurious and more advanced than many vehicles from major manufacturers. As for the technical details, the Pirana relied almost entirely on proven Jaguar mechanics, but thanks to its new body, it offered a somewhat different character. The car measured around 4,660 millimeters in length, 1,770 in width, and only 1,150 in height. It was therefore long, low, and visually very wide. The track was widened by using broader Dunlop wheels and tires, which improved the body proportions and gave the car a more muscular stance. Under the bonnet worked the previously mentioned 4.2-liter XK engine, fed by triple SU carburetors, or according to some post-restoration references, returned to the correct Jaguar performance tune. An output of around 265 horsepower provided very respectable performance. Period sources quoted a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of around 8.5 seconds and a top speed of up to 235 kilometers per hour. That placed the Pirana among the genuinely fast GT cars of the late 1960s. Importantly, the car was not only functional, but ready for normal road use. In theory, you could simply collect it from Bertone and drive it across Europe. In fact, that was the plan. Although in the end, the car was transported to London for its debut to avoid risking damage to the freshly applied paint. The Pirana made its debut at the London Motor Show at Earl's Court in October 1967, and it was a major media success. The Daily Telegraph proudly placed the car on its cover with a headline along the lines of, "We built the star of the motor show." And that was hardly an exaggeration. The car generated huge interest because it looked like a ready-made answer to the question of what a modern grand tourer of the late 1960s should be. After its appearance in London, the Pirana returned to Italy for the Turin show, and later it was displayed in New York and Montreal as well. Everywhere, it drew attention both as a beautiful design and as a strange, almost unbelievable example of a car created by journalists rather than by a manufacturer. At the same time, observers quickly began noticing similarities between the Pirana and other Bertone projects. When the Lamborghini Espada debuted in 1968, many people had little doubt that Gondini had carried over much of the stylistic language he had developed while working on the Pirana and the Marzal. That is why the Jaguar Pirana is sometimes called the cat that inspired the bull. A Jaguar whose silhouette influenced one of Lamborghini's most important cars of the era. Despite the interest, the Pirana was from the very beginning a one-off project. Although printed materials and the mood after the premiere sometimes suggested that a small production run might be considered, there was never a real plan to put it into series production. Only one example was built, and that singularity is exactly what makes it so special today. After its show circuit ended, the car was sold in 1968. Some sources mention a price of around $16,000. Others say $17,000. And others note that John Anstey bought the car from Bertone for 2.5 million lire before selling it on. Regardless of the financial details, one thing is clear. The car entered private ownership, and after that its story became much less clear. Over the following decades, the Pirana passed through several owners, most likely mainly in the United States. At one point it was repainted dark green, its gearbox was changed from manual to automatic, and small rear seats were added, turning it back into something closer to a 2+2. Those modifications may irritate purists today, but they also show that for a time, the car was genuinely used rather than simply stored away as an exhibit. For many years, the Pirana remained largely outside the main narrative of automotive history. It was never fully adopted either by Jaguar or by Lamborghini, even though it formed an important stylistic bridge between Bertone projects of that period. For that reason, it remained something of an orphan for more than 4 decades. Too Italian for Jaguar, and too British for Lamborghini. It was only in the 21st century that the car began to return to the awareness of enthusiasts. Around 2010, it appeared on eBay, still in modified form. Soon afterward, it was purchased by an owner who decided on a full and very careful restoration back to its Earl's Court, 1967 condition. That meant restoring the original silver paint, recreating the interior in the correct Connolly leather, removing the later added rear seat, returning the manual gearbox, and reconstructing all the unique equipment details. This was not an easy restoration because many parts were one-off items built by hand at Bertone, and documentation was incomplete. The final result, however, turned out to be outstanding and restored the Pirana to its rightful place among the most important concept cars of the 1960s. Today, the value of the Jaguar Pirana comes from several overlapping factors. First, It is the only example. Second, it is directly associated with Bertone and Marcello Gandini, names that are absolutely central to the history of automotive design. Third, it has an extraordinary story as a fully functional road-going concept car, commissioned by a newspaper and shown at the major salons of 1967. Fourth, its stylistic importance in the context of the Espada is enormous. It is therefore no surprise that when the Pirana crossed the block at R.M. Sotheby's in Monterey in 2019, it sold for around $320,000, according to some sources, and according to others, around $290,000, including fees. The discrepancy comes from different ways of reporting the final result, but one thing is certain: the car achieved a significant price, though perhaps lower than one might expect for such a remarkable machine. If it were to return to the market today, in a climate of growing interest in one-off coach-built cars, Gandini projects, and unusual design icons, its value could easily be higher. It is reasonable to assume that today such a car could be worth at least several $100,000, and with the right presentation and two determined collectors, possibly much more. The 1967 Jaguar Pirana remains one of the most extraordinary automobiles in history, not because it was the fastest, the most expensive, or the most radical technically. Its uniqueness lies in something else. It is material proof that vision, courage, and good taste can create something truly timeless, even without a major factory standing behind it. This car was born from pure passion for the automobile, from the dream of the ideal grand tourer, and from the belief that the best British mechanical engineering could be combined with the most modern Italian style. The Pirana was not merely a stylist's whim. It was a fully functioning, carefully developed car that could genuinely be treated as a GT of the future. Today, we look at it not just as a curiosity, but as an important missing piece in the story of late 1960s automotive design. It was the car that showed what an alternative Jaguar future might have looked like, and at the same time helped influence the birth of one of Lamborghini's most famous models. In a world full of concept cars that never truly ran, the Pirana was real, and perhaps that is exactly why it still makes such a powerful impression today.